The concealed shadows within a prosperous and apparently cheerful household. Folks frequently assert that vast riches contained even the most ethical people, yet that's not completely accurate. Funds don't generate defects, they amplify those already existing, providing individuals the false sense of immunity from repercussions and permission to behave without limits. And although being without funds is certainly tough, it's essential to recall that currency, gems, and figures in a financial account can't ensure joy, especially if they're obtained via deception or constructed on another's pain. The 2020 incident concerning Saretta and Leon Britz triggered ripples not just across South Africa, where the event occurred, but worldwide. The probe was anticipated to be challenging, particularly as an unblameless individual was initially viewed as the main culprit. Only following a surprising and heartfelt admission did the actual perpetrator emerge, someone who held the slightest malice toward the victim. To grasp the complicated storyline, we must return to the beginning, when finances turned into the primary cause of dispute in a clan long perceived as big and united. The Britskin, European settlers, had established themselves in the early 1970s in the tiny but appealing village of Puff Adder in South Africa's Northern Cape area. Despite its size, the settlement acts as a vital financial and visitor hub in the Bushman territory. In 1976, the Brits couple greeted their initial boy, Taki, succeeded by their next son, Leon, in 1979. By regional measures, the household was considered truly affluent. The family head possessed what was probably the region's sole major inn, which subsequently grew into a complete lodging and dining facility. Both siblings excelled in studies, engaged vigorously in athletics, and due to their folks' endeavors, obtained elite schooling. Post-graduation, Taki relocated from their native town, whereas Leon, who had aided his parents and mastered the inn operations from adolescence, opted to stay, gearing up to ultimately assume the kin enterprise. He was astute, meticulous, and endowed with an innate business acumen that enabled him to handle affairs efficiently. The lodging compound held by the Brits clan regularly organized diverse occasions, festivities, and gatherings. And it was during one such event that Leon noticed an impressive young lady. The instant he saw the slim, dark-haired woman with emerald eyes and a captivating grin, she seized his focus right away. The youthful guy neared her to present himself, merely to discover she was only 14 and still attending classes. Though she seemed far more mature, the disclosure profoundly disturbed Leon, who was already 25 then. Nevertheless, he invited her to dance, and later, they passed almost an hour conversing on the balcony. The student's name was Sarita, and from their encounter, Brits couldn't erase her from his thoughts, continually envisioning their following rendezvous. Sarita came into the world on September 6, 1990, the youngest among 3 kids in a lineage of Eastern European migrants. They existed in destitution, and her parents' union had been deteriorating for ages, a circumstance that merely intensified when their littlest girl was merely 9. The family leader perished sadly after a poisonous serpent bite, abandoning the mom solo with 3 offspring and battling to endure. Every Kerr child was compelled to labor simply to survive, rendering Sarata's youth an era defined by adversity and ongoing scarcity. Then suddenly a rich suitor appeared in her existence, a guy apparently prepared to offer her all she had lacked. Since she was so youthful, she lacked knowledge on how to react to the notice of an adult male who was 11 years senior. Leon seemed truly enamored. He hunted for any chance to meet her, collected her from lessons, escorted her to famous eateries, lavished her with costly gifts and stylish attire, and did all possible to charm her. Sarata started getting items she had never experienced prior, and the abrupt opulence swiftly engulfed the pupil. She understood that alongside this guy, she might possess a secure tomorrow, a household where neither she nor her kids would ever want for anything. Her mom, in spite of Sareta's youth, endorsed the bond. Leon presented as reliable, honorable, and compassionate, and nobody questioned the intensity of his fondness. Leon's folks, though, were profoundly worried by the romance. A connection like theirs, if it grew too intense, could readily venture into unlawful ground. But Leon maintained he was ready to pause until she reached 18, after which he planned to wed her lawfully. Then arrived the unforeseen. Roughly a year into their bond, 15-year-old Sareta found she was expecting. She wavered to inform anyone, completely conscious that the announcement would distress both her mom and her partner. She commenced wearing baggy outfits to hide her altering form and became aloof and reserved. Ultimately, she recognized she couldn't hide the fact anymore and elected to reveal all to her mate. Leon was astonished by the disclosure. He realized the scenario could not merely hurt his reputation, but also result in grave legal issues. Their closeness had been initiated by him, and now he chanced being charged with exploiting a juvenile, an option he couldn't risk encountering. His first action was to fund a visit at a confidential medical center where the expectancy was confirmed and they discovered she carried twins. As the expectancy approached a pivotal stage, Leon organized for a physician at the identical private facility to conduct an unidentified abortion. Sereta was devastated, feeling completely shattered as the guy who had sworn to love and protect her forced her into terminating the existence of their unborn offspring. But with his maturity and power, Leon succeeded in convincing her the operation was necessary. He guaranteed her that once mated, they would certainly have kids. But presently, he asserted a pregnancy would ruin their lives and spoil any chance for a happy future. With no genuine ability to oppose, the young female assented and proceeded with what he required. She suffered multiple days of physical agony afterward, but the emotional burden was much greater. Submerged in guilt and an overwhelming sense of hopelessness, Sereta remained confined in her chamber, crying endlessly, unsure how to persist under the burden of what transpired. Her mom displayed minimal concern, presuming her daughter was simply distressed over a dispute with her beau, and that matters would soon resolve once they made up. Several days afterward, Leon showed up at her entrance and escorted her to the Metropolitan Spa, aiming to divert her with strolls in the garden and trips to stores. He thought this would help her heal and boost her mood. Slowly, she succeeded in resuming her regular existence, although sentiments of bitterness and mistrust toward her companion lingered. 3 years afterward, in her final year of secondary school, she learned she was pregnant once more. At this point, she was merely months from attaining adulthood, and this upsetting and sensitive situation was not originally expected to produce major problems. When she notified Leon of the expectancy, he reacted severely again, demanding that she end it, stating they were too young to start a household. This occasion, Sereta held firm, announcing that she would retain the child even if she must nurture it solo. After some contemplation, Leon proposed officially, offering her an exquisite diamond band. By then, the original gentleness in their bond had diminished considerably, but the approaching arrival left him with few options. By the time she completed secondary school, her expectancy was clearly evident, and in the autumn, soon after she became 18, the pair conducted an extravagant ceremony. The new spouses seemed externally happy, though both nurtured private doubts about whether their decision had been wholly correct. Several months later, the pair greeted their first boy, and 2 years following that, twin lads arrived. Living in luxury and capable of satisfying every wish, they appeared to outsiders as a thriving, happy family. The venture that Leon's folks had built and expanded over many years proved highly lucrative. Leon eventually initiated his own series of shops and quick-service restaurants, which flourished beside the kin operation. However, by the mid-2010s, the household started encountering difficulties and setbacks. In 2014, Leon's dad passed abruptly, owing to chronic cardiac issues, and the jolt gravely impacted his mom's well-being. She rapidly started displaying swiftly advancing indications of Alzheimer's, compelling her sons to situate her in a dedicated facility to guarantee she got appropriate attention and care. Toki came back to his native village after many years distant to help his sibling in overseeing the kin venture, and jointly they assumed control of operating the inn. Simultaneously, Leon resolved to engage his spouse in the kin undertaking, realizing a long-standing aspiration of hers. They enrolled a shop focusing on extraction gear and instruments under her title. She immersed herself in her duties while persisting to tend to their 3 youthful boys. Brits, the oldest, commenced primary education in their native town of Palfora. As the twins matured, the parents confronted the urgent issue of choosing an appropriate academy for all their offspring. The complication resided in the reality that locating superior instruction in South Africa was distant from simple. The pair identified a fine academy in the adjacent metropolis of Kuko, roughly 75 miles from Bert's residence, but everyday travel wasn't required. They chose to lease a roomy dwelling in Kuko, where Sarita relocated with the kids, while Leon stayed in Palfora to supervise the kin venture, which he couldn't manage from afar. Nonetheless, Sarita had to withdraw from operating the shop despite relishing it and attaining notable achievement. She committed herself fully to nurturing their boys, who solely visited their dad on weekends and vacations. Leon, because of his rigorous timetable, seldom journeyed to Kuko. Initially, matters appeared controllable, but gradually the pair became progressively remote, and their emotions for one another diminished notably. In 2018, Sarita started facing health troubles, which she originally ignored. However, clinical assessments disclosed that she had malignancy plus heart-related issues. She promptly experienced operation to excise the harmful growth and was assigned a regimen of therapy. Fortunately, the prompt action preserved the existence of the parent of three. From that moment, she needed routine precautionary treatment at a facility in Johannesburg, which was rather expensive. The Britt's household could cover it, and Leon never withheld any costs for the well-being of his kid's mom. Moreover, Sarita hired a caregiver and a domestic helper to aid with home tasks and tend to the kids, which was vital whenever she needed to journey for therapy. By that period, the pair had become so estranged that they were basically leading independent existences. Sarita initiated a romance in Johannesburg, opting to reside with her paramour instead of in a lodging during her precautionary therapy trips. Leon, it appeared, also possessed outside unions, as incriminating pictures and communications were found on his device. In truth, the sole element still linking them was their three offspring. Despite the household upheaval, the venture persisted to succeed. The inn, shops, and eatery chain produced considerable gains, portion of which Leon placed in property in key cities, gaining a reliable revenue from leases. Their household was not merely the richest in Potfora, but also amid the most prosperous in the Northern Cape area. Obviously, the Brits drew numerous jealous and antagonistic people whose quantities appeared to increase with the triumph of their venture. Leon, his folks, and his sibling often got menaces and diverse requests. Leon frequently shared with his spouse that he had long since insecure and dreaded that somebody might attempt to grab his life's accomplishment. In every of Leon's workplaces, plus at his residence and his parents' residence, there were vaults and ingeniously hidden spots holding money in various currencies, bonds, gems, ornaments, and precious metal ingots. Sarita knew of merely some of these, mainly those in their personal home. Initially, the menaces were a major worry, but over time, as they turned routine, Leon commenced to disregard them, thinking they were simple efforts to scare him since none had ever materialized. Yet a calamity shortly occurred, suddenly concluding Leon's existence. On October 7, 2020, Leon's spouse phoned him to request he inspect their canines, which a neighbor had stated had escaped. Leon vowed to ring back after ensuring all was okay, but that reply call never arrived. Becoming anxious, Sarita attempted phoning him multiple times. Entrusting the kids to the caregiver, she drove to their dwelling. The entrance was unlatched, but the home seemed vacant. Within, it was unusually silent, and nobody responded to her shouts. When she proceeded to the rear yard, she found her spouse's corpse drifting face downward in the swimming area. Injuries were noticeable on his rear, and the liquid was shaded pink with blood, an obvious indication that he was deceased. Terrified, Sarita summoned both law enforcement and urgent aid, then reached Toki to notify him of the occurrence. When authorities reached, they promptly secured the dwelling as an offense location. It was evident that the entrepreneur's demise had been brutal. His corpse displayed numerous puncture injuries and evidence of a fight, and a vault in the home had been accessed and its items pilfered. The isolating of the accomplished and rich entrepreneur swiftly became news, igniting strong press attention, online discussions, and broad hearsay, chatter, and conjecture. Many knew of the enduring menaces against Brits and presumed that competitors or adversaries had ultimately executed them. However, the chief suspect promptly became Toki, who had been overseeing the kin venture with his sibling for many years. He had visited Leon just prior to the event and was allegedly the last individual to see him living. Furthermore, his mom's condition was extremely frail, with physicians estimating she had merely a few months remaining, and her testament was reportedly stored at the younger son's residence. The dominant idea indicated that the older sibling opposed how the venture was operated, primarily by Leon, and wanted entry to the testament to alter it. This logic also explained why other valuables in the dwelling had remained untouched. It was also believed that Toki had not operated solo and that killing had not been portion of the original plan. Toki staunchly denied any participation, asserting he would never injure his own sibling, especially since they never disputed over monetary issues. He requested support from Sarita, who voiced her faith in his innocence and vowed to help him find the best attorney to defend him. For almost 2 months, the investigation remained stagnant, with no new evidence, clues, or witnesses. Then one day, 35-year-old Jock Van Hoeren entered the law station proposing to make an agreement. He would admit fault and reveal all his partners in trade for a reduced penalty. It surfaced that Jock had once gone to the same academy as Sarita. They had been friends, and Jock had once possessed feelings for her, although she did not reciprocate, and soon started a bond with Leon. The former friends had lost contact for many years until a random encounter at a retail hub revived their dialogue. At that time, Jock was undergoing a tough phase. He had separated from his wife, forfeited his job, acquired a liquor license, and was struggling economically. Noticing that her former suitor still had sentiments for her, Sarita started sharing with him about her discontented marriage. She alleged her spouse abused her and mistreated her, but that she could not leave him because he threatened to seize her boys and abandon her penniless. This resonated with Van Haren, whose former wife had also blocked him from seeing her offspring post-separation. He truly sympathized with Sarita and wanted to help her. They exchanged contact details, and a few days later, Sarita, having crafted a slight plan, phoned her past pal and weepingly alleged that her spouse had been physically violent. She stated that she could not leave him and maintained that the only solution was to remove the problem. Oppressor. Sarita was extremely convincing and Shocks trusted her. She also guaranteed him a sum of $500,000 South African rand, which attracted Shock, who was frantic for funds. Shock consented to aid Sarita, but he did not wish to execute the deed himself, so he resolved to employ others. The scheme was initiated in early 2020, but the worldwide outbreak compelled the postponement. During this difficult era, the Britskin venture endured major deficits. A shop and portion of the eatery chain had to shut, and Leon wished to vend the inn, a step Sarita resisted. In late September, the plotters reactivated their original scheme, but Shock demanded obtaining half of the sum beforehand. Due to her monetary woes, Sarita could only extract the 100,000 rand, and she also surrendered her betrothal band. Utilizing these funds, Shock enlisted his pal Enrica Williams, who battled with substance dependence and was prepared to slay for money. Williams, uncertain he could subdue a robust grown male alone, recruited his 25-year-old pal Ahmed Labachi to divide the sum with him. Sarita supplied the invaders with entry to the dwelling, informed them where the vault was situated, and permitted them to seize whatever they desired to render the fabricated theft seem believable. Her sole stipulation was that the canines stay safe, so she released them prior. Neighbors observed this and contacted her, which acted as her cue that Williams and Baki were within. She then phoned her spouse and directed him directly into the deadly snare. When the unaware guy entered his residence, one of the concealed assailants hit him on the skull with a baseball club, while the other charged at him with a blade, granting him no opportunity to resist. Leon was pierced 8 times and struck with the club a dozen times before his corpse was tossed into the pool. After accessing the vault, the invaders discovered no money, only bonds, gems, and precious metal ingots. They transferred the pilfered items to Shock, who then conveyed everything to Karita. The assailants elected not to seize anything else from the dwelling, concerned that taking more would leave excessive proof. They were depending exclusively on the significant sum they had been assured. Yet remorse and dread of the retribution that awaited them pressed heavily. Shock had never been intended to enter the offense location. Sarita fretted he might be recognized on monitoring recordings, particularly since Toki had observed him several times and knew he was an old academy pal of his sibling spouse. Shock was intended solely to provide the advance sum and convey Sarita's directions to the employed men. But his anxiety overcame him. He drove by the Brits' dwelling multiple times to verify the assailants were positioned and that Leon had arrived as planned. His car was recorded on footage, and though the registration wasn't distinct, investigators showed interest in the vehicle, meaning it was merely a question of time before they identified the proprietor. Additionally, there had been no money in the vault, and all household accounts were suspended during the investigation. Sarita had no means to compensate the slayers, as vending gems, precious metal ingots, or bonds would instantly reveal her. She requested them to pause, but Williams and Baki declined, commencing to menace Shock. Frantic and remorseful, Shock had not yet obtained the assured sum and feared that his partners might betray him. He understood he confronted a bleak option: wind up incarcerated or suffer the identical destiny as Leon. Shock shared with his sibling, who notified their mom. Jointly, the ladies convinced him to surrender to authorities and reveal the identities of the other plotters in trade for a milder penalty. In his complete admission to officials, Shock alleged he had operated out of a feeling of honor, perceiving Leon as an abusive spouse who mistreated Sarita and menaced to seize the kids. In actuality, it was Sarita who had originally directed the authorities to regard Toki as the chief suspect, mentioning conflicts over a testament and assets between the siblings. Officials resolved to arrest and interrogate her to expose her genuine intentions. It became apparent that she and Leon had long-lost affection, each conducting separate existences. Sarita possessed a paramour in Johannesburg, whom she desired to unite with forever. When she voiced her wish for separation, Leon rejected flatly, and menaced to abandon her destitute and seize the kids if she attempted to depart him. While his precise reasons are unclear, it's possible Leon still possessed emotions for his spouse and aspired to mend their bond. Sarita, however, schemed to inherit Leon's riches and venture after his demise, securing a luxurious life for herself and her paramour. She also perceived an opportunity to remove Toki by implicating him, eventually becoming the only proprietor of the inn, shops, and eateries after her mother-in-law's departure. Her plot might have triumphed if the vault had held money, and if she had been able to compensate the employed slayers. The hearing of the 4 plotters occurred in the spring of 2021, with each member's function in the prominent case meticulously reviewed. Jacques Van Uren, who had made an agreement with the accusers, disclosed all details and named his partners, obtaining a 20-year jail term with possibility for release after 5 years. The employed slayers Enrique Williams and Amanda Labachi were deemed culpable for planned killing with exceptional brutality and theft, obtaining lifetime penalties without chance of release. As for the widow who masterminded her spouse's slaying, she effectively convinced the tribunal that she had been a victim from the outset of their bond. She declared that Leon had pressured her into closeness when she was merely 14, and a year after, when she became expectant, had compelled her to end the expectancy at a later phase to avoid accountability. In the years that ensued, despite the lack of affection, he refused to depart from her and menaced to seize the kids if she attempted to leave him. While his precise reasons are unclear, it's possible Leon still possessed emotions for his spouse and aspired to mend their bond. Sarita, however, schemed to inherit Leon's riches and venture after his demise, securing a luxurious life for herself and her paramour. She also perceived an opportunity to remove Toki by implicating him, eventually becoming the only proprietor of the inn, shops, and eateries after her mother-in-law's departure. Her plot might have triumphed if the vault had held money, and if she had been able to compensate the employed slayers. The hearing of the 4 plotters occurred in the spring of 2021, with each member's function in the prominent case meticulously reviewed. Jacques Van Uren, who had made an agreement with the accusers, disclosed all details and named his partners, obtaining a 20-year jail term with possibility for release after 5 years. The employed slayers Enrique Williams and Amanda Labachi were deemed culpable for planned killing with exceptional brutality and theft, obtaining lifetime penalties without chance of release. As for the widow who masterminded her spouse's slaying, she effectively convinced the tribunal that she had been a victim from the outset of their bond. She declared that Leon had pressured her into closeness when she was merely 14, and a year after, when she became expectant, had compelled her to end the expectancy at a later phase to avoid accountability. In the years that ensued, despite the lack of affection, he refused to depart from her and menaced to seize the kids if she attempted to leave him. However, Sarita Britz was penalized to 25 years in jail with possibility for release from the beginning of her term. The tribunal considered her stated regret, honest admission, and her position as the parent of 3 youthful kids. Despite this, 3 years post her penalty, she remains imprisoned. If you found this incident interesting, remember to approve the clip and join the Kata Network. We upload crime incident clips every night.